The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen curtains, casting long stripes across the floor where toys were scattered from the night before. I was making tea when I heard my daughter's footsteps. Quick, uneven, the kind that told me something was wrong long before I saw her face. She stood at the doorway with her 3 children huddled close to her legs. Her eyes were swollen, as if she had cried all night, and her hands kept shaking as she pushed the hair away from her face. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," she whispered, voice cracking like old glass. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but before I could speak, she kneeled down, gave each child a hurried kiss, and stood up with a suddenness that startled them. The youngest reached for her, calling, "Mama," in a small, frightened voice. But she didn't turn. She didn't kneel to reassure them. She didn't explain. She just grabbed her purse, eyes fixed on the ground as if she couldn't bear to see their faces, and walked out. The door closed behind her with a hollow thud that echoed through the whole house. For a full minute, there was silence, heavy, suffocating. The children stared at the door, waiting for it to open again. When it didn't, they ran to me instead, their arms wrapping around my waist, their tears soaking through my shirt. I held them tightly, feeling their fear and confusion trembling against my chest. I told myself it was temporary, a moment of weakness. She would come back. She had to. But as the minutes stretched into hours, a small, painful knot formed in my stomach, one I didn't dare acknowledge yet. That was the day she walked away, and the day I stepped into a role I never expected to fill. 13 years slipped by like pages torn from a calendar, loud, messy, exhausting, and yet filled with a strange kind of beauty. I never planned to raise children again at my age, but life rarely asks for permission. Each morning began with the same rhythm. Lunches packed, shoes found under couches, arguments settled before school, hugs exchanged at the door. And each night ended with homework battles, stories read under warm blankets, and 3 tired heads resting safely under my roof. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I picked up double shifts, cleaned houses on weekends, and learned how to stretch a single paycheck in ways I didn't know were possible. There were months when I didn't buy a single thing for myself, not even a new pair of shoes, because the kids needed uniforms, school supplies, or medicine. But every sacrifice felt like an investment in their future, not a burden. Their smiles, their achievements, their growing confidence, that was my reward. As they grew older, their memories of their mother softened, like photographs left too long in the sun. They asked about her less frequently, and when they did, it was with curiosity rather than longing. I answered gently, never speaking with bitterness, even when my heart ached with the weight of unanswered questions. Birthdays, graduations, first heartbreaks, I stood beside them through every milestone. I became their audience at school plays, their nurse on sick nights, their cheerleader at sports events. I watched them transform from frightened children into strong, thoughtful young people who looked at me with trust in their eyes. Still, a part of me held hope. Hope that someday my daughter would return, not to reclaim them, but to acknowledge what had happened, to explain, to apologize, maybe even to heal. But 13 years passed and the phone never rang. Only the bond between me and the children grew stronger, stitched together from shared struggle, unconditional love, and the unspoken promise that I would never, ever walk away. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind where nothing extraordinary is supposed to happen. The kids, now teenagers, were scattered around the house, one doing homework at the dining table, one listening to music in her room, and the youngest sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. I was kneading dough for dinner when a sudden, forceful knock shook the front door. Not a friendly knock, not a neighborly tap. A hard, official thudding that sent a ripple of dread through my chest. I wiped my hands and opened the door, expecting perhaps a delivery or a stranger at the wrong address. Instead, 2 police officers stood on the porch, their expressions unreadable. One held a folder, the other rested a hand on his belt. My stomach tightened. "Ma'am," the taller one said, "we need to speak with you." My first thought, irrational but instinctive, was that something had happened to my daughter. I felt my throat tighten as I asked, "Is she all right?" The officer glanced at his partner, then opened the folder. "Your daughter has filed a report," he said. She claims you took her children without her permission 13 years ago. For a moment, the world simply stopped. My brain tried to process the words, but they made no sense. I let out a short, confused laugh, thinking this must be some horrible misunderstanding. Took them? She left them here. She walked out. My voice trembled, half with shock, half with anger I had never allowed myself to feel. The children appeared behind me, drawn by the tension in the air. Their faces went pale as the officer repeated the accusation. The youngest whispered, "But that's not true. Grandma didn't take us." Procedures, paperwork, statements. They explained it calmly, but all I heard was the shattering of 13 years of quiet, fragile peace. My daughter, absent all this time, had returned not with gratitude, explanation, or remorse, but with an accusation sharp enough to slice through everything I had built. As the officer stepped inside, I felt something inside me crumble. I had expected many things over the years: anger, regret, even forgiveness. But never this. Never the day I'd have to defend myself for loving the children she abandoned. The police station smelled of old papers, stale coffee, and something colder. Something like judgment. I sat in a chair that felt too hard, too small, my hands clenched in my lap as I repeated the same story I had lived for 13 years. The officers listened, typing notes, nodding occasionally, but procedures were procedures. No matter how sincere my voice was, they needed verification, timelines, witnesses, anything to turn my truth into something official. Then came the part I dreaded most. The children were interviewed separately. Watching them walk into those small rooms broke me. They were old enough to understand, but young enough to be shaken by the sheer absurdity of it all. I could do nothing but wait, the weight of the past pressing heavily on my shoulders. Hours later, she finally arrived. My daughter. She walked into the station with an air of confidence that didn't match the trembling child I remembered leaving her children behind. Her posture was stiff, her chin lifted as if she were the one wronged. When our eyes met, something inside me recoiled. This wasn't remorse or confusion. It was pride, brittle and defensive. She claimed she had only left them for a few days, and that I never returned them. She spoke as if the last 13 years were a temporary misunderstanding, as if birthdays, fevers, achievements, and tears were just babysitting. Every sentence she uttered felt like a fresh betrayal. When she saw the children, she stretched out her arms as though expecting them to run to her. Instead, all three instinctively stepped back and stood closer to me. The flicker of hurt in her eyes quickly hardened into anger. "You turned them against me," she snapped. Her voice echoed through the room. I wanted to scream, to remind her of the day she walked out without a word, the nights they cried for her, the birthdays she missed, the school meetings she ignored. But I stayed calm. The truth didn't need volume, it needed patience. Social workers, lawyers, and officers discussed custody, intent, and history. My daughter kept insisting she had been robbed, but the evidence, her absence, was louder than her accusations. As the session ended, I realized something. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a reckoning. She had abandoned her children, and now she was facing the truth she had run from for 13 long years. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Sterile white walls, polished floors, and an air of quiet tension that made every breath feel heavier. The children sat beside me, dressed neatly, nervous but determined. My heart pounded in my chest as the judge explained the process. Each child would speak privately, one by one, to share where they wished to live. Their voices, not mine, not their mother's, would guide the decision. I squeezed their hands before they left. "Tell the truth," I whispered. "Whatever it is, I'll accept it." And I meant it. I had never wanted to force them into loyalty. Love, real love, cannot be demanded, only earned. Minutes felt like hours. I watched each child enter the judge's chambers and emerge with red eyes but steady steps. Their mother sat across the room, tapping her foot, arms crossed, jaw tight. She looked confident, too confident, as if she believed biology alone could erase the past 13 years. Finally, the judge returned, adjusting his glasses as he read the report. His voice was calm, careful. All three children have expressed the same preference. They wish to remain under the permanent guardianship of their grandmother. My daughter's face changed instantly. Shock, disbelief, then a twisting anger that tightened every feature. "They're children," she shouted. "They don't know what they're saying. She manipulated them." But the kids stood. All three. And the oldest, now almost an adult, spoke with a trembling strength that silenced the room. "We're not confused. Grandma didn't kidnap us. She raised us. She sacrificed for us. She's our family. She's our home." Tears pricked my eyes, not from victory, but from the profound heartbreak and love wrapped up in that moment. The judge confirmed the ruling. It was over. As we walked out of the courtroom, the youngest slipped his hand into mine, his voice soft but sure. "Grandma, you saved us." I turned once to look at my daughter. She stood frozen, staring at the family she had walked away from. She didn't call out. She didn't apologize. She didn't follow. And for the first time, I felt not anger, but acceptance. 13 years ago, she abandoned her children. Today, they chose the person who never did. We stepped into the sunlight together, our strange, imperfect, hard-won family, leaving the shadows of the past behind us.